Hi everybody, welcome to day 2 of Octoberspook. In this story today, we'll have some child abuse triggers in it. It is called A Woman Buried Her Daughter Alive in a National Park I Work For, and it is by RooMorgue. She didn't mean to kill her. That fact I know. Like others before her, she was trying to put something else back. Or thought she was, at least. Having worked in the park for a good 20 years, I have learned enough about the things that live on and under this land that when I was sent word through my radio that a lady was seen digging in a certain area by night, I had some idea of what I was about to find. Driving up the dirt road, I recognized her right away. Thin, blonde, Gwyneth Paltrow type. A little mean, high-strung. Can't say I know her entire history, but she had her reasons for being so. Her daughter had gone missing for a few hours on a field trip and wound up in one of the bureaus out by Mount Shrog. If she'd been out there for much longer, there wouldn't have been any getting her back. As it was, I guess she only bumped her head a bit and probably saw some things she didn't understand. Scares people. If they don't know the history of the place, of the animals, sends them a little strange, especially if they're already soft to start with. The little girl that tripped down the burrow sure came back different, but she was herself all right. I would have kept her down there if she weren't. Sounds callous, but it's part of the work. Protecting the visitors, the land, and the wildlife. I've done my best at it over the years, and though I don't always hit the mark, I'll keep at it till my body gives out and makes me quit. Even amongst the rangers, only those of us who've been here longer than 5 years ever learn the reality of what's going on out here, and it's up to us old-timers to keep it that way. The cops from Walpurgis Town have a sort of deal with us. They spread rumors as to drug-related activity, to muddy the waters, and scrub the web of anything too outlandish that manages to slip through. Stops folks asking many questions we can't answer, or science types messing around out here and ending up hurt, which has happened a time or two over the years. So when I saw Miss Cameron sitting out by those bureaus in the dark, I figured one of the younger rangers had tipped her off as to some of the truth, only not all of it, or else she would have never tried dealing with the things that live out there under the dirt. Getting out of my vehicle, I shone my flashlight around the area, making sure that there was no other visitors hanging around to cause problems at the scene. The lady was alone, slumped in the grass in a stained dress, sweat soaked in half-suns under her armpits. The burrow she'd been loitering over had been filled with loose dirt, and the spade she'd used to do it lay abandoned in the grass short a way off. There was blood on the blade, caked in bricks of mud. "Miss Cameron," I said as the woman blinked at me, red-eyed through the night, "you mind telling me what happened out here?" I could guess at it, but I had to hear it in her own words, for the official records. Trembling like a run-down hair, Miss Cameron said, "Lainey, I was so sure she wasn't my daughter. Your colleague Mel, she called me. She told me that there are creatures living in these bureaus, and they took her and gave me one of their own children instead. I wanted to give their thing back. I wanted to bring my little girl home." She knew by then what she'd done. I could hear in her voice a madness coming on in her like the weather. "Creatures," I repeated, gently. "Melanie told me that there were fairies. Is that right? Maybe she said something about silver too, or salt, or something like that. Can help them down there, where they belong. I guess it wouldn't do no good in bringing a lost kid home. But Miss Cameron..." She looked up at me, scrubbing her nose on her sleeve, so close to a sudden hope that it hurt me to break it again. I'll never forget the dark that came over her. Dark and the blackness I've seen in the eyes of dead deer look that way before gathering flies over their film in the woods. Miss Cameron, I said, those things aren't fairies, though they might look that way to some people. And though they do take folks down into their tunnels sometimes, they don't usually send and change her out top for a day or so. Guess they need time to start to look like whatever they got a hold of. Hell, if I know what they do with them down there, maybe they eat people. Maybe something worse. All I know is that they didn't take your girl. Shook her up at most. Tormented her the way they like to do. Or maybe something else was wrong with her, I guess. I stared at the dirt, the blood on the spade, the light, bit hair stuck to the end of it, moving in the wind. Sadness knocked through me like a shot put, and I had to turn away, thinking how many nights I'd had like this, how many days, all of them the same. Miss Cameron mumbled under her breath, still trying to grab at the impossibility that she hadn't done what she did. But what are they? Those things, then? She asked suddenly. Why are they hiding that they're out here? They hurt people. I crouched down beside her, going through my pocket for a bit of tobacco to chew. It's a bit of a habit. It's a habit I picked up from my father long ago, 15 years dead. I still think of him when I do it, clenching down on the memory to ground me. Animals do kill guests at parks like this, from time to time, I said. It's nature's way. We rangers try to keep civilians in areas we know are safe, or reasonably so, where we can keep an eye on them. But sometimes people end up going stray. Here at the park, we have things other than animals around. Hard to say what they are, or where they came from, seeing as they're all so different. But they were here way before any people ever were. I call them old kings. Everybody calls them something else. Walpurgis folk only know about some of them, so they make up fairy stories, get it into their heads that they understand, but they don't. Let me tell you a story, back from when I'd been working here just 3 years or so. I know I had to keep talking till an ambulance turned up, which I'd already called, and on my way over. I had to keep Miss Cameron's mind off the kid in the ground, and whose hands had put her there. I'd seen what could happen if I didn't. If I keep talking, I keep this woman alive. There's a place we call Howler's Ridge, I said, kind of thin, high hill pass overlooking a valley. We didn't recommend it to inexperienced hikers back then, and we warn people right off of it now. There are signs up, and we have cameras monitoring the area, so as people didn't stumble up there not knowing any better. Folks said they hear strange noises like howling, not like the wind through the valley, or wolves, or coyotes, or any sort of animal at all. It was like a vocal whooping human voices, I guess, hollering, screaming, rebounding off one side of the ridge to the other. So it made folks feel like they were being haunted, hunted, somehow, only they couldn't see a damn thing. Not a person for a mile, and though it wasn't the wind making the sound, there was always one hell of a gale blowing up there. Guests would come down and saying it was like they were being pushed and shoved around. That's how strong it was. I paused, taking a quick look at Miss Cameron. Her dead doe eyes met mine far too evenly. Go on, she said. I want to hear it. And don't hide any of it, Diane. I need to know. Please, I want to understand. Nodding, I went back into my story, which in all my life I told only once before. One day a girl went hiking up at Howler's Ridge, I said. Just turned 19 years old, She took a couple of friends with her. They walked along there a time, had their camcorders out filming a bit of the way. I've seen some of the footage. You can hear the girls laughing, talking, and a little wind, nothing out of the ordinary. Then on one of those tapes you hear the noise start up. The hollering. Some of it deep like a man, others like folks being tortured. And you see the girls being dragged back and forth, just ragged around like something had its hands on them. They start screaming. The camera falls down the valley. One gets stuck on a bit of rock and ended up being salvaged afterwards. The girls? Well, 3 of them we just found in pieces, ripped apart. So as there would be a leg in one place, a head somewhere else. Too purposeful to be animals that had done it. And there were no other people around at the time. Besides, there was the tape. The last girl, well, me and another ranger found her coming down the ridge in state of shock. Both of her arms torn off. Hell knows how she didn't bleed to death. Still alive as far as I know, though she doesn't talk about what happened. Can't, since she didn't see a damn thing anybody would believe. The wind, she told us. There was something alive in the wind up there. They did it. As soon as the words came out of her mouth, the ranger I was with went sort of stiff, like he'd heard the story before. It was after that we put up all the signs. Miss Cameron sat quiet, rubbing a flake of blood off her cheek, knowing she'd been right. She'd been right about at least one thing. The night was holding her together. She'd figured something strange lived in the park. She just hadn't known how deep it ran. Strange thing is the howlers tend to leave the rangers alone, I said. Same with most of the old kings, except the odd case, now and then. It's like an instinct. They know what we're doing out here, and don't meddle with us if we do the same. We're caretakers for them and their habitat. The kings only live as far as a certain point, and most can't cross it. That's what makes me think it's the park itself that brought them here to start with. Don't know how or when, and certainly not why. But here it is. The land's alive. That's what I believe, and always will. I don't understand, said Miss Cameron dully. She wasn't crying, and that had me worried. Too calm is a sign to watch in these cases, and one of the worst. I was glad to hear sirens in the distance, vehicles pounding the dirt roads through the park. I don't understand it either, I said. And I've come just about as close as this place will let a person get to the truth. I've seen forests breathing, even walking. Bodies of people missing only hours ago turn up looking like they died a century back. Things crawl out of the lakes, and I have to pretend I don't see until they go back in. Folks aren't meant to know about these things like that. All I've got to do is take care of the park and the visitors. Only I don't always get it right, and I'm sorry for that. I really am. Miss Cameron didn't say a word, didn't hit me or laugh. The stupid cruelty of my position, and all the human lives that I was forced to watch slip by for the sake of those I'd chosen to guard. She just sat there until the cops and ambulance came for her, looking at the shallow grave that she'd built in the darkness.